In this video, I'll be teaching you how to build Keqing best. Now for her artifacts. It's no surprise by now that Keqing's most optimal playstyle is within Dendro teams, so these recommendations will be based on the most ideal way to play her. 4-piece Thundering Fury is her best in slot by far in the modern Dendro age. It'll buff her aggravate DPS and allow her to pull off more skill casts. Having more casts of her stiletto offer a few nice things, like reducing her monster stamina consumption during a rotation, giving her more energy particles, and allowing her to teleport all over the place more frequently. The main positive about having such a low skill cooldown is that Keqing will have zero downtime on her infusion. You'll constantly be releasing Electro Madness. This means she'll be able to proc more official A4s, which is a huge team DPS increase for Aggravate. 4-piece Thunder Soother is another good pick. Your Electro uptime is always going to be high on Keqing, so the full set effect is highly reliable. This is quite competitive with 4-piece Thundering Fury, but if you're not playing Aggravate Keqing, then this 4-piece effect is far less reliable. 4-piece Gilded Dreams provides some nice EM and attack buffs that Keqing really appreciates. It's solid, but falls behind the other two sets I mentioned earlier by a small amount. 2-piece mix and match sets are fairly decent on Keqing. You can use 2-piece Thundering Fury, any 2-piece EM set, and any 2-piece attack percent set, and you'll be good to go. Using 2-piece EM twice, or 2-piece attack percent twice, is barely any worse, so you can just go for whatever has ideal substats. Note that for quick swap Keqing, you can also slide 2-piece Noblesse in there. As for main stats, it can depend. She's able to use both attack percent and EM for her sands, but really the difference between them is so small, so just use whatever has better stats. Make sure to use an attack percent sounds if you're running Gilded Dreams, however. Of course, an electro damage percent goblet, and then crit rate or crit damage for the circlet, whatever you need more of. For substat priority, you'll want to go for this. As for her ER requirements, Keqing has a dirt cheap cost of only 40 energy, so you'll essentially be fine with the base ER of 100%, especially if you're running her with another electro in the party, or if you have her C2. But if you're running neither of those things, a pinch of ER is fine, but don't bother going any higher than 120%. Don't bother overcapping on ER, since you could reinvest those rolls into more offensive substats. Since you made it to the end of this section, why don't I offer you this cool artifact sheet ranking her best picks? Thank you to Theory Crafting Legend and Chat Thundah who made this for the video. Go check out his channel too, link will be in the description. I'd like to highlight that the main value of 4-piece Thundering Fury comes when you use Keqing in a team with Fischl, as the non-existent skill cooldown allows Keqing to proc Fischl's A4 at a much faster rate, resulting in much better overall team DPS. Pause if you'd like to read for longer. Now let's move on to her weapons. But before we do that, if you're enjoying the video, why not consider liking and subscribing, maybe even leaving a cool comment down below. If you do, then Keqing will appear in your bed tonight. Or, just tell me who you lost your 50-50 to down below. That'd be cool too. Okay, moving on. Now, which weapons exactly are ideal for our false cat girl? Once again, these recommendations are all based on an electro-based Keqing. Mist Splitter is going to be her best in slot pick no matter what. Really powerful stat stick and is excellent across all her playstyles. Definitely use it if you have it. Jade Cutter is up next. It's actually very competitive with Mist Splitter thanks to the huge crit rate the weapon provides, and is an excellent secondary choice. Very consistent to use as well. Haran is also very good for Keqing, and Foliar Incision is solid too. But don't pull either of these specifically for Keqing if you don't already have them. I just get Mist in this case instead. Freedom Swarm is really nice for Dendro Keqing, but once again, just pull for Mist if you don't have this guy already. Now for her 4-star picks. R5 Tukabu Shigure is a nice free-to-play option, but falls off in AoE situations. Use this for Keqing as her most ideal free-to-play pick. But if you miss the event period for this weapon, then you can craft an Iron Sting for her instead. But Iron Sting isn't as good as Tukabu. R5 Harbinger of Dawn is a great pick for Keqing thanks to the massive crit stats it offers, but you really want to maintain the passive uptime on it, otherwise it falls off by quite a bit. Lion's Roar is a great all-rounder pick for Keqing and will work nicely in her aggravate teams. But the Black Sword can beat out Lion's Roar with some EM and attack buffs. It also boasts a solid crit rate stat stick. These suggestions will pretty much be the same regardless of whether you choose to use an attack percent sounds or an EM sounds on your Keqing. All other sword options aren't all that hot on Keqing, and I definitely recommend avoiding any of the support-based options, such as Favonius. They do next to nothing for her. Since you made it to the end of this section, why don't I reward you with this nice little sheet ranking Keqing's most ideal sword options. Pause if you'd like to read for longer. Now let's delve into her best teams. Once upon a time, Keqing wasn't a cat, she was a dog. Because she was dog until Aggravate came along. Aggravate Keqing is easily the strongest way to play Keqing nowadays. It consists of the star of the show herself, of course, another Electro unit who will almost always be Fischl, a Dendro unit of any kind, and an Anemo on the end. With Fischl, she's able to generate insane particles for her party, and Keqing is able to consistently apply Electro to proc Fischl's A4. Genuinely the best combo for this setup. You can also sacrifice Fischl sub DPS for Cookie, who can provide some mitigation to the team and trigger some of her own aggravates. Beidou can also work in AoE scenarios, but unfortunately her ER costs are pretty high without Fischl to help her out. You can also just use Yai, but at that point, why aren't you just running Yai Aggravate on its own? Keqing would be taking up her field time, not the other way around. For Dendro units, you honestly have quite the multitude of choices. Yes, Nahida works, but it's kind of annoying to use her since then you have like freezer negative survivability, so you're forced into prototype Amber with her. Or you can go for a more comfortable unit instead. I recommend going for either Yao Yao, Baiju, or Karara instead for a more comfortable gameplay experience. You'll also find they actually synergize more comfortably with Aggravate Keqing over Nahida as well. But let's not undervalue Nahida here. If you're good enough at the game, then Nahida is the highest damaging option for Keqing Aggravate. This is because the team has a lot of iframes, essentially moments when your characters are invincible. Keqing's burst makes her invincible. She can reposition easily with her E, Nahida's burst has a low cooldown, Fischl's burst has a low cooldown, and Kazuha's skill and burst both have solid iframes on them. So for all you hardcores out there, Nahida should be fine for you. While Kazuha is ideal for a last slot and his C2 can really help out with this team's DPS even further, you could opt to use Sucrose as well for her EM sharing as it's appreciated here. But keep in mind that Sucrose is a lot better on paper than she is in practice. Another thing about Kazuha is that he's particularly strong in this specific setup. Kazuha is always powerful, but he really excels with Aggravate in particular. He cleans up AoE very nicely in this team and contributes a ton of personal damage, and his buffs are extremely valuable to the team. Lynette is also quite a good choice for Keqing Aggravate, but she lacks powerful grouping. Great sub DPS in this team, however. Aggravate is Keqing's specialty. There really isn't any other team archetype where she's nearly as powerful as she is here. So personally, I'd say don't consider other team comps. She was considered one of the worst characters in the game pre-Dendro for a reason after all. So, now we've talked teams. Why don't we discuss her talents and best combos in depth for a little refresh. To start, let's look at her normals. On their own, they'll deal 5 simple strikes of physical damage. Okay, cool. And her charged attack will deal 2 rapid sword strikes. Her skill has both a press and a hold. Both will produce what is called a lightning stiletto. If you press, the stiletto will be thrown to a nearby enemy that will deal some small AoE electro damage and will leave a stiletto mark on the ground for 5 seconds. Holding her skill will allow you to aim where you throw the stiletto. You're able to aim it in the air as well, and when you release, she'll throw a lightning stiletto in the direction you aimed it. The stiletto's power is the same between press and hold. Then when the stiletto is on field, if you press her skill again, Keqing will teleport to the stiletto's location and do a slash attack, which deals AoE electro damage. However, if you choose to do a charged attack while the stiletto is still on field, then she will instead unleash a Thunderclap Slash. The Thunderclap Slash unleashes where her stiletto is. This deals AoE electro damage. A nice little technique with her hold is that you can aim it up to enemies such as the Aeon Blight Drake to stun them with her stiletto. Her skill is extremely important to her core playstyle, which I'll discuss when I get to talking about her A1. Then for the main source of AoE damage in Keqing's kit, her Elemental Burst. She'll deal 1 initial electro attack, and then 8 quickfire electro slashes in an AoE, finishing off with 1 large slash for an impactful electro blow. This also features a really nice cheap cost of only 40 energy. Her burst has excellent value thanks to her A4, which we'll cover in a moment. Hold on. Now we get onto her Ascension passives. Her A1 is ultimately the core of her kit. After you recast her skill, once a lightning stiletto is present on field, Keqing will gain an electro infusion for 5 seconds. This infusion is very strong, and can't be overridden by infusions such as Bennett's C6. Note that using a charged attack while a stiletto is up and triggering a thunderclap slash will not trigger this A1 for you. In other words, you'll only deal physical damage, and physical damage plays as well as Minecraft on a Nokia, so I seriously do not recommend playing her in this way. Her A1 is what allows her to constantly apply Electro at an incredibly fast rate, and is the main thing you want to take advantage of when playing Keqing. Keqing's A1 is also what makes Fischl her best partner in crime, since the amount of Electro application has steamrolls Fischl's A4. Now for her A4, which is part of why her burst ties her kit together so nicely. Whenever you cast her burst, Keqing's crit rate and energy recharge both increase by 50% for 8 seconds, and she gains these buffs from the moment she casts her burst. So that means the buff you get from this passive will last for about 5 seconds after her burst is finished. There's also a nice technique you can take advantage of to have full electro uptime on your Keqing in case you want to stay on field with her for longer than 5 seconds. The cooldown for her skill begins the moment you release a lightning stiletto, not when you recast it or deal a thunderclap slash. The lightning stiletto has a 5-second duration, and her skill has a cooldown of 7.5 seconds. So this means there's a 2-second gap in between with her electro infusion. If you cast and recast her skill immediately, you'll be left with that gap. However, if you cast her stiletto, unleash her burst, so you can take advantage of her A4, and then recast with a fully buffed up electro infusion time, her infusion will end right when her skill becomes available again. In other words, her skill will refresh at the same time your electro runs out if you use her burst before recasting her skill to remove the stiletto. Now for her talent priorities. First off, for a standard Keqing build. Rest in peace, whoever you were wishing for. You'd want to go for this. Then for quick swap Keqing. For this, you'd want to level her burst first, skill second, and normals last. You don't really have to level her normals that much if you're playing her like this. Another note is that you should absolutely level Keqing from 80 to 90 if you're playing her in her most optimal teams, which will be Dendro teams. She gets a massive DPS increase from level 80 to 90 in her aggravate comps. Now let's discuss her optimal combos. So how should you handle this false kitten? Well, for starters, N1C is her highest damage output combo. You can also weave her Q after her first E for that additional electro uptime technique I mentioned earlier. However, if high stamina consumption or energy knockback is an issue, you can also go for N4C instead. N4C is Keqing's second best combo as it allows your stamina some breathing room while not having her DPS completely fall off a cliff. Keqing's charge attack consumes 25 points of stamina, which is one of the highest out of any current sword user. For reference, the stamina cap is 240 points. If you need to deal with heavy knockback, then you can dash after enemies or jump towards them. Dashing is more comfortable but drains stamina, like how this Keqing figure drained my wallet, while jumping towards them saves your stamina, yet feels really irritating to. So, you've optimized your Keqing into oblivion, and now it's time to take her to the next level. Or, the game decided to take her to the next level for you after you lost your 50-50. Let's take a closer look. This is a small DPS increase for Keqing, and while you can yield both instances of damage out, you'd have to do your skill casting and recasting extremely close to your enemies to get both of these hits off, which is kind of unreliable and hard to achieve. Her C1 also shares an ICD with her skill, so this doesn't really matter for aggravate Keqing. This con doesn't matter much for Keqing specifically, but if you're running her with Beto, then the extra particles are neat. Increases her burst level by 3, just a simple DPS increase. 25% attack is pretty great, and this con is really easy to keep uptime on. A nice increase. Just a +3 talent upgrade to her skill, nothing much more than that, cool DPS increase. You can get a solid amount of electro damage percent from this con, so honestly not that bad, but damn, you'd have to be really unlucky on limited banners to get this. Let's hope you're a true Keqing enthusiast who happened to pick this up with standard, yes? Well then. We're out of Sumeru now, and the days when Keqing was a disgustingly underpowered unit feel so far behind us now. She's honestly a really solid DPS who's really accessible to free-to-play players, while still having a nice edge for established players. Aggravate is still a super solid team archetype even at the beginning of this Fontanian era, and I believe she's going to continue to age pretty decently. build her if you'd like a well-performing Electro DPS. Hopefully this guide was able to make your Keqing deal numbers high enough to cure your depression from losing the 50-50. Well then, this has been Juice, signing out, and I wish you all a fine evening.